This is straight from the heart. It's generosity to the students I don't teach, about the novel I don't teach, for the money I'm not going to get, because it's all about getting the top grades. So first, last year AQA chose Simon, which was awesome because Simon is the Christ-like figure in the novel, and it takes us straight into the Christian symbolism. That also means, however, that my prediction for last year, Ralph, is highly likely to come up this year. So my character prediction is Ralph, and I will link that video at the end of this so you can watch last year's prediction where my character prediction was sadly wrong. However, my theme prediction was totally bang on the theme of evil. And I won't congratulate myself too much there, because whatever the question is, it's always on the theme of evil. You know, even if it were about what kind of leaders are Ralph and Jack, that's just another way of saying, are they really evil? So whatever the theme question is, that is actually what the question's about. So I'm going to give you a plan for this theme of evil, which you are going to adapt to whatever the question is. So we're going to start off by pointing out that this is a nuclear war, which we're supposed to infer from the way that the plane crashed. This, of course, in 1954, is the very definition of evil. This is a bomb to end all kinds of destruction. Nothing like it's ever been seen before, and is horrified the public in every country in the world, but particularly in Britain, because we were part of developing it with the Americans, and we also had the nuclear capability. So, evil in our own society in protection of our own country. Then we have Ralph. He is, on the face of it, a very noble character, but when we're first introduced to him, he's actually quite heartless towards Piggy and instantly betrays him at the first opportunity to a person that he likes more, in Jack. So this asks us to consider the idea of whether we're all born evil. You know, even if we have impulses towards good, are we actually more evil than good? This is going to give us the theme of original sin, which will pop up again in a minute. Next, we have Roger, who is a more pure embodiment of evil. He is simply interested in destruction and chaos, which we see initially when he's lobbing stones at the boys by the palm tree, and then that metamorphosizes into when he levers the rock onto Piggy and shatters Piggy. So absolutely destroys him. Piggy represents the mother figure in the novel, a female figure, which will be important later with the killing of the sow, also a female pig. So Golding is heavily suggesting that men are violent towards women as part of their human nature. Jack, he is the normal embodiment of evil, but he kind of steps into evil accidentally. He's unaware of his own evil propensities, and yet we meet him clothed in black, a symbol of death. He carries his own dagger, another symbol of death, which he's actually going to use to kill the sow and to kill the pigs. This reveals that, and he's English, remember, sorry, I should add that. This reveals that the heroic English soldier is still at the root an evil being in Golding's mind. Remember, he fought in the Second World War, and he's reflecting on what the propensity to kill was like amongst his peers. He doesn't divide the world into bad Nazis, good Englishmen. He just sees lots of atrocities. Obviously, it's much better to be an Englishman than a Nazi, but the means that we use in order to defeat the enemy are horrendous, which we'll see at the end of the novel. The means that Jack uses to try and destroy Ralph mimic the idea that in war we go far beyond the limits of civilization. We can see that collectively when all the boys get together to participate in the killing of the sow. And now you need to look at that scene because it's very sexualized, it's very violent. I'm not going to describe it because YouTube will say, ooh, we're demonetizing you, Mr. Salles, we don't like this sort of stuff. But it's really worth repaying those moments because this is an attack on masculinity. Golding is really saying that men in particular are inherently evil. It's no coincidence that there are no women on the island, and the female figures, Piggy, who's like the mother figure, and the sow, are brutally killed. Then we have the symbolism, which takes us back to the original sin. So we have the fear of the little boys, the nightmare of the snake thing. That obviously brings us back to the serpent in the Garden of Eden. And then that changes into the beast, a more dangerous version of the serpent, or evil incarnate. Satan, if you like, or Beelzebub, Lord of the Flies. I'm sure you've studied that. After that, we have the parachutist, who is described as the dead man on the hill, a clear reference to Jesus, who died on the hill of Calvary. And then, of course, the parachutist is blown off and described as walking across the water in a kind of parody of Jesus. And so what Golding is suggesting here is that the boys on the island, like mankind, are so evil that God has abandoned them. Jesus has abandoned them. They've been left because they are so far from Eden. If we go to the island itself, it is an Eden-like state. By the end of the novel, they have completely reduced it to ash. You know, the fire will consume the whole island probably, or a good part of it. They have destroyed it. They've destroyed paradise just as Adam and Eve did, or rather much worse than Adam and Eve did. Then we have a descent into savagery. Obviously, you're used to that. We can see that with the pig's head on a stick as a sacrifice or an offering to the beast. And then we can see that in the way that Simon is killed. This is another inversion of Christian symbolism. So in Holy Communion, we eat the body of Jesus and we drink the blood of Jesus with the wafer and the wine. And their parody of that is the way that Simon is bitten. So he's actually eaten and his blood is symbolically drunk. And then the image of him dead in the water is like a soul being taken off to heaven to be at the right hand of God. And so here, instead of dying to save the boys, like Jesus does, Jesus dies to save mankind. The implication is Simon's death won't save anyone because no one has listened to him. He dies without being able to impart his wisdom to them. And, you know, that's symbolic of how evil mankind has become. It's a further fall that's much worse than the fall in Eden. Then, of course, we have this complicity amongst the boys into committing this horrendous act where they're going to kill Ralph and cut off his head and put it on a stick. None of the boys can actually tell him precisely what's going to happen because it is too horrible. They can't articulate their actions that they intend to carry out. And yet, despite it being so horrendous, they're still going to do it. So this again characterises how evil men and mankind is. The fire I've already mentioned. Now we have to go to the rescue. The rescue is what we would call a deus ex machina, where an implausible rescue happens because a god suddenly appears. And symbolically, the naval officer dressed in white is like an angel who's come to save the boys from the destruction of the island. However, this is heavily ironic. He is an officer on a warship and he's taking the boys onto a warship, symbolically into war. So far from being rescued, they're really being taken back into an even more violent environment, which is civilization. Civilization has broken down. The true condition of man is warlike, and the white uniform is a veneer of respectability, just like the school uniforms at the beginning of the novel were a veneer of respectability. And once those are removed, civilization falls away really quickly. So that is Golding's point. He seems to be quite nihilistic. He seems to think that God has abandoned mankind, and he thinks that men in particular are violent and brutish. Now, you might have been taught something completely different, which is cool, but I've just given you an essay plan that will fit any question really about Jack or Ralph or evil. They're all the same question. So if you want to study Ralph, this is the video to watch next.